and territory planning and management. My research is about urban agriculture and community gardens. It has become a fad, but these practices are usually spontaneous, unregulated, many times illegal, and often cause conflict. So I was provoked by this idea. The political, social, economic, healthcare, are they contributing for the insurgence of new social movements and struggles? Now, from my perspective, which is community gardens and urban agriculture, we can have an idea, and I try to bring a direct answer. I believe so. I believe the current multidimensional crisis is provoking the emergence of practices that question urban space, that try to dispute, to fight for food safety, food sovereignty, and try to establish new forms of relations with people in the city. However, the answer is not just and only yes. It's not just about the emergence of new movements and struggles. These are practices that respond to the crisis, challenges that are placed before us because of the crisis. An acute crisis we're living today of the pandemic, or maybe chronic crisis. But of all of this that I was able to analyze is, yes, we do find different answers to the challenges. The challenge of the homeless, the challenge of access to nature, food sovereignty, the lack of spaces for ancestral or traditional practices. But there is a question. When does practice turn into struggle? I mean, if we think about practice and struggle and how practice precedes struggle or struggle precedes practice, I mean, we do not have a universal and single answer as we look at this object. But I believe it is an interesting key for us to reflect upon. Practice, struggle, and maybe they are so intrinsic, they are so together that you can no longer separate. And it's so good, it's so nice to think about struggle as practice because it has this dynamic process with nature and layers that overlap. So first you have a struggle for food, and then you need access to produce food, and then you need the right to plant your own food. And that's because these practices are not in the emptiness, and then they become more complex. And we must think about this emergence of movements and practices. How do they continue, and how do they add more dialogue, and what kind of conflict will they engage in? So if you have identity issues, the feeling of belonging, but you also have property which precedes these practices, but now you see an aggravation because of more interest, because of new regulations in the use of territory. But again, they may work as a lever for change, even structural change. That is, they become a form of struggle that can go beyond, for example, privatization, fences or fencing property, and how agriculture becomes an argument to protect or to fence these spaces as they are absorbed by the authority, by the public power. And now it has become very evident. Now you see that as recommendations of good practices under this big international umbrella of resilient cities, solutions based on nature. And some criticize, well, the city where I live, urban agriculture does not exist. It's been criminalized. Now, it is important to think about that, because the fact that we are dealing with a practice that makes the city greener, maybe it has this idea that it's neutral. Who could be against greening our cities? But if on the one hand, we have this interesting provocation that is how urban agriculture is based on care and responsibility, but it can also be a factor for peace, to discipline practices, because in principle, if you value acceptable practices, and agriculture could be an acceptable practice, well, then you bring discipline and you bring peace as people live in the city. I know my time is up. I still have many other things to bring to the discussion, but I believe we could think about this. I mean, how it's not only emerging new movements and struggles, but how that can unfold. And I think about how that may become a political alternative, a political proposal. So how these contingent practices will, at a certain point, become an alternative that will stand on its own 2 feet. I'm sorry, my time is up, but that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Leticia. Let's go through all the presentations, and then we'll have time for a common chat. So I invite now Ariel Garcia, Fernando Fontanet, and Javier Gibaudi. I hope I have not done too much injustice to the names.
Sim, obrigado, Himanshu.
Yes, thank you, Himanshu. I'd like to request to share my screen, please, so then I can make the best possible use of my 5 minutes. I'm not able to share my screen. May I? Can you help me?
Javier, espera só minutinho, que ele vai liberar para você aqui.
Javier, just a minute. You will be able to share your screen.
Obrigado, Fabrício.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, you can now share your screen. Javier.
Certinho, dá para ver?
Yes, that's right. Can you see it?
Okay.
Good.
Bom dia.
Good morning, all of you. I would like to first thank Garcia and the organizers for this invitation. Ariel is a director of CEUR, CONICET. He has just presented his PhD thesis on this topic. The idea is for us to make a compared research in the political relationships around solidary economy or solidary finance. I'll speak briefly about the conceptual framework, study cases, hypothesis, and then we'll open for a discussion. So the conceptual framework, we have 2 main authors, Veronica Gago and Anania Roy. And as Leticia mentioned, they will speak about the richness of practices, the nuances, the contradictions of concrete political practice. Against that view that look at non-prevailing sectors as solidary, as fighters, the essentialist view, and also other views, deterministic views that view politics as, how can capitalism works better? How can I oppress conflict? So the theoretical landmark, the theoretical framework sees the concrete situation and its contradictions. So as we analyze solidary finance, we look at 2 cases. One, the municipality of San Martín in the great Buenos Aires region, and this is an industrial city. The population is a big population. They have a strong labor force. And another municipality, which is Maricá. Maricá in Rio de Janeiro is much smaller compared to San Martín, but it's also close to a metropolitan area, and it's not an industrial city. So they're very different. However, both say they have solidary economy programs or solidary finance programs, that is public loans for low-income people to be able to have production and trade, that is so that they have a more emancipatory, a more leveled ground. But this is the speech. Now, if we go down to practice, and Fernando Fontanet has also studied this as of 2010, And we have analyzed a number of hypotheses. I will mention these hypotheses to you, but the main hypothesis is, well, this comparison will have to look at the different context. So it's a different political and economic context, because San Martin is an industrial area with manufacturing plants. Maricá is a smaller city that has a high income from oil royalties and a very different history. But what do we see in both experiences? Well, on the one hand, we see how this policy of solidarity financing is based on important past struggle. In Argentina, the act of microcredit, which was a national discussion in Argentina and in Brazil, the experiences of community popular banks, especially the Bamas Bank, which is a whole network of actors for these acts to exist today.
On the other hand, the two experiences work in the daily life when they pay very high interest rates for lower income sectors. And on the other hand, there is discourse of individualism and entrepreneurship in Brazil. It's very strong. They want people to be micro entrepreneurs, and they have this discourse. And so we need these cooperations, and this is a very important issue that we stress as a way out. And one important issue that is in Fernando's thesis is the importance of the mediators and agents that work in the outskirts of the city, beyond specific policies, beyond the plan, the paper. What we see is that the municipality agents that implement these policies work in their daily lives in the territory, and these agents have a lot of history with a life history of acting in this territory. They are militants that have relations, personal relations with the organizations with which they interact. So it's not just a bureaucrat with a neutral law. They are political activists that work in contradictory situations, tense situations. And what we see most of all in San Martin, where we research a lot, is that based on the work in the territory, in their daily lives, and that they build political relations that allow them to have political actions in places where the municipality never went to. It's like San Martín is the outskirts of Buenos Aires. And these are the outskirts of the outskirts, and they will act politically in places where there are other actors that they have high interest rates, and that's what I wanted to tell you. I have my 5 minutes are over. So just to conclude, this was the hypothesis to present here and discuss here, and I put here our emails so that you may have more information. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to you all.
Thank you, Javier. Both of you so far have kept to time very well. I'll invite Larissa Lacerda, Fernanda Moreira, Paula Santoro, and the big gang to present the third paper, and whoever in it wants to really go first.
A gente vai, por favor, precisar compartilhar também.
We will need share screen too.
Ainda não consigo compartilhar.
Sigenco, Júlia, você pode ver isso? Você que está aí, ô Robson? Para eles poderem compartilhar a tela?
Sim, já vou compartilhar. Quem vai compartilhar é a Débora? Isadora. Just a moment, please. Agora. Compartilhando a tela. Um minutinho. Agora a máquina. Um minutinho, Isadora. Vira tentar agora, por gentileza. Isadora, poderia tentar agora.
Eu estou tentando ainda, estou desabilitada.
A screen aparece o ícone aí embaixo para você?
Aparece. E tá Host Disabled Participant Screen Share.
Isso, só clicar agora. Share Screen.
Não, quando eu clico no Share Screen, ele me dá a mensagem de Host Disabled Participant Screen Share.
Um minutinho. Um minutinho. Tenta agora de novo, Isadora, por gentileza.
Eu acho que o host continua o Javier, que fez a última apresentação, né?
É,
Um minutinho.
agora o suporte técnico está como host.
Eu vou colocar Isadora. Por gentileza,
Acho que
poderia.
vai.
Obrigado, Isadora.
Tá dando certo?
Acho que sim, agora foi, né? Bom, eu vou fazer a apresentação, então vou começando para a gente não perder muito mais tempo. O trabalho que a gente vai apresentar aqui hoje chama Parceria...
Não posso falar agora, estou no meio de um outro trabalho, desculpa.
...como disparador de conflitos em territórios populares.
As something that triggers conflict in the University of São Paulo. I wrote it, Paula Santoro, Gisele Brito, Isadora Marchi. Here we look at two popular territories that have disputes and conflicts where the new conflicts were established because of the threats of eviction motivated by the occupational policy of the municipality of São Paulo based on the PPPs, the public-private partnerships. It's a model of policy of building new housing, but there are two PPPs, both state and municipal levels. They want to build 500 and something housing units for different income layers of population, and the territories in which the policy are getting worse. And around these territories under dispute, there are arenas of conflict with a number of agents, public dwellers, public figures and politicians and universities. So our reflection has a comparative look upon two territories, Julieta and Cachoeirinha, that you may look in the map. In Jardim Julieta, they have different popular areas. Some are consolidated for more than 40 years, and others are recently occupied in the context of the pandemic, which was a number of threatened families and because of this, the local leadership counted these families that had to go to occupy this land. So some of them are there since the 1980s, and they wanted the total eviction of the place, and now inhabitants are fighting this. Besides, the existing organizations are not under the modules of the popular movements with which the academia is used at dialoguing. The leadership are more fragmented among internal and external agents of the territory. They don't believe the threats. In the last case, there are some city councilors that promote the eviction of the territory. In the public ministry or the prosecution office, they have a lawsuit and they want to defend public territories. And there was new conflict in Cachoeirinha, the next territory. It includes 5 territories, and 2 of them are consolidated, and 3 occupations that are more recent, and they are well known. This includes 3,000 families that are threatened of eviction. These territories do not share the same senses of a historic threat. The organizations of dwellers articulated very broadly to challenge this threat, and they have now an articulation called Those Affected by the PPP. They produce several materials, petitions, a primer, and a socioeconomic survey made by the local organizations and dwellers. Of course, this needs a consensual resistance to PPP. They have a great conception of the threat. In both territories, the conflicts are not going to be pacified. The pandemic brought new layers of complexity on territories that already had urban conflicts that are now threatened of eviction. The contracts are beginning, but the dispute will never be ended. And to conclude, 3 points of a more general reflection. The PPP is built upon a consensus, housing, but housing not as a right, but as a consensual decision. And also it imposes as one only possibility of dwelling through private property, the communities that are in apartments. The PPP makes invisible many other forms of housing, and the forms of existing organizations have an impact on the modes of organization before the threat, and that historically elected as its privilege actor the social movements. But not only this, the conflicts and agents that are previous in each territory will have an impact on the articulations that are built. Thank you very much. I had to speak very fast because I had to keep the timing. Thank you.
Thank you, Larissa. I could understand. Yes, sure.
Nós estamos com um problema nessa sala.
We have a problem in this room. It's very small. It only fits 100 people. So we are going to move to another room in the internet. And Robson, the technician, is going to explain to us how to do it.
Okay, sure.
Essa sala acabou que a gente mudou para uma sala menor. Tem muita gente de fora.
We have a small room, so a lot of people are outside and they cannot get in, including some panelists. How can we do this? We are going to make a webinar for you because we have a limitation on the number of people that can come in. So all of you who are present here, we're going to enter the same link. We will have a new link, updated link. We have to leave and come in again. You have to come in, and in 5 minutes you will get the new link and start again. Click at 11:30. We'll come back. At 11:30, we will come back to a new link. We will have to leave this room now, wait for 10 minutes, and come in again. He's going to open up a new room. So Robson will give us a link in the chat. No, I'm going to send the link here in the chat. Maybe this will make it. It will be published in the platform. And I'll send it to the panelists as an invitation too.
So shall we leave now?
No, he's going to put